Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty, episode number 141 for May the 10th, 2024. And we're going to continue our series today on the Accuquilt die cutting machines system and how to cut your fabric efficiently and correctly. But before we do that, what do we have to show you? Nothing. I do have a secret project, but you cannot see it yet because it's a secret. And Walter is still working on his shirt. And how far have you got on it now?
I haven't done anything.
He hasn't done anything. So we have nothing to show you. Could be a short episode this week. Okay. So let's talk about announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Stephen, Wednesday, 9 a.m. till approximately 4 p.m. All are welcome. Links in the show notes. Okay. We did the Sewcial review this past week. We had some technical problems at the beginning of it. And when I say we, I mean me. I thought I had it all set up right. You have to, you're going through two different programs when you're doing something like that, because we use Zoom and we use YouTube Live, and the two are not very intuitive in the way they talk to each other. Stephanie had taken me through it all. She, Shannon, and Russ never seem to have a problem with it. I don't know why I do. Well, probably mainly because I use a third-party program as well, and that's what I'm more used to. But anyways, we got it to work. So sorry about that for those of you that on the first 20 minutes, and if you've watched the replay, you will see it skip in about 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll get to where we were finally connected correctly for that. Hopefully, by the next time it's my turn to host, I will have this worked out. Okay, so what did we talk about on the Sewcial review this week? If you haven't seen the replay or weren't there for it, we talked about our favorite gadgets, devices, tools, and we also talked about the things we felt we wasted a lot of money on. And some of those things are kind of controversial because some of you really, really like what we really, really hate, and vice versa. And that's a given. This is all up to personal preference and opinion. So that's replayed. It's on my channel. It's on the Idiot Quilter, so you can catch it there if you're interested. Pop-up sew day. Now, I think originally at the beginning of this week, I suggested I was going to have it on May the 18th, which is a week from today. A week from tomorrow. I'm not having a good day today, so let's just say. Yeah, Walter's giggling about it.
Yeah, well, you don't sound like you haven't had a good day in a while, because all I hear is a lot of unhappy talk from you.
Yeah, you're so supportive. Not. Don't ever, look for, gotta get this up here, look for, a kind word or two from this one. Oh, he gets criticism, yeah. And he giggles about it.
What do you mean criticism? I always give you a kind word.
Yeah, what kind of word is that? But anyways, moving right along here. So, originally, as I said, I thought I was going to have a pop-up sew day on May the 18th, which is a week from tomorrow. But then I realized that, oh, wait, that's the long weekend for us here in Canada. It's the May 2-4 weekend. Don't ask me why we call it May 24th, May 2-4, when it's going to be on May the 18th. It has something to do with how they set it up for Queen Victoria's birthday a million years ago. So anyways, not that that would necessarily affect a whole lot of people that would be coming to the pop-up sew day, because let's be honest about it, most of our subscribers are Americans. But then Walter found out that he's got an in-person sewing day on May the 25th, which means I'd be sitting around here twiddling my thumbs all by my lonesome. Not such a bad thing. So I've decided to put it on May the 25th. So there will be a more formal announcement about that coming out probably in another week's time. And I will be sending out in another week's time an email with the link to all those of you that are on my mailing list. And I will post it in my show notes for everything. But that won't happen. Well, that might happen next week. I'm getting all my weeks mixed up. I'm sorry about it. I'm still got COVID fog brain. Walter just says it's old age. Again, another reassuring comment from Walter. Like that. Yeah, let's see the look on his face. Someday your face will stick like that. Probably already has. Okay, so yeah, stay tuned for details. All right, there's a special event coming up this evening, and this is Friday, May the 10th. At 8 p.m. on Russ's channel, Quilt Meets World, he is having his 1,000 plus subscriber bash. And I don't know what he has planned. I hope there'll be cake. Of course, it's the best kind of cake to have. It's virtual cake, means no calories whatsoever. But we'll see. So if you're interested, it is a YouTube live. So just go to Russ's channel. You'll find the upcoming thumbnail for it. Click on that, and away you go. Now, Stephanie and I posted our first Tabletastic sew along. That's where we're doing the Churchill block from the Dan Lico book, Tabletastic 2. We created that on Thursday, and it went up on my channel. They'll all be up on my channel. Yeah, if you're sewing along with us, we did the first step with that one. Okay. My second pattern is now available free to all. There's a link to my Google Drive so you can download it for yourself. It's called Windmills and Stars. I don't even remember the name of my own pattern. Something with windmills in it. Anyways, see, whatever, as he jokes about it. I wish I had a big rubber club right now. Anyways, it's available. Download it. Do with it what you will. In a week's time, a week from this Friday, well, today, May the 17th, Stephanie has a special live event, and she's got some surprises. And I know what the surprises are, but she has sworn me within an inch of my life that I cannot mention a word about it, and I'm not very good at keeping secrets. So what kind of look was that? Something you don't understand about what I just said? What? Or you're just making eye things for your fans so they can all giggle and have a good time because everybody just loves Walter's facial expressions. Yeah. Anyway, so tune in for that. I think she's got I know she's already got the link up on her channel. I have one in the show notes below as well. But that's not until a week from today, May the 17th. Okay, do you have any news, any events to bring up? Anything exciting happening in your life?
I'm going out to lunch with.
You're out to lunch
on Tuesday, and then at the end of the month, I have a retirement party to go to.
Well, aren't we just Mr. Socialite? Just fun all the time with Walter. Everybody wants to do lunch with Walter. I'll just sit at home and suck on an old cheese sandwich that I found possibly sitting underneath the sink, rotting, because it missed the recycle box. Okay, so let's get to the main event today. The main event today is the session number 2 of Accuquilt, and it's how to cut efficiently. So I found this on the Accuquilt site that I'm going to put up here. They have a whole PDF. If you own an Accuquilt or are thinking about getting one, do go often to the Accuquilt.com site because they have a lot of resource material on there. Besides selling the machines and the dies, they have free patterns, embroidery files that go along with that. We'll be talking about that in a future episode, how those work. And all kinds of tips and tricks that'll make your cutting more efficient and faster. So this one, they call it an ebook. They have some basic instructions. And here, we talked a little bit about this last week, but it's good for a review as to how you set up your die cutting sandwich. You might want to call it that. And essentially, you have the die on the bottom with the foam side face up. You put your fabric on top of that, and then you put your cutting mat on top of that, and away you go. That's all there is to it. Now, you do definitely have to have the cutting mat, which will come with some, usually get a cutting mat with a cube box, but you can buy them separately, and they're in different sizes depending on the size of the die. You don't need a separate cutting mat for every die you buy. There's about 3 or 4 different sizes of mats. They cover all the dyes. So, and they last a long time and they're not that expensive, but you have to have that. If you just lay your fabric down, forget to put the cutting mat on top of it, well, it won't wreck your machine, but it won't cut your fabric either because there's not enough pressure there to press down and cut through. So you'll know when you have forgotten that because it just slides right through the machine without any resistance whatsoever. So then they have a section on cutting your fabric. Now, first of all, they talk about going with the grain, which means that they say for most accurate cuts, be sure you're cutting on the lengthwise grain, straight of grain, as the fabric goes under the cutter. And then they explain the lengthwise grain runs parallel to the selvage edge. And they have a little diagram here beside this. So you're going through the machine this way. Up here would be the selvage. So basically your stomach's down here, your belly, your waist is down on this side of it on the machine. So at the top, that's your selvage. And so you're cutting then the way they recommend it, lengthwise of grain. The bound edge is the fabric that prevents unraveling or fraying, and that's why you do that. You'll have less fraying that way. Does it mean you can't cut your fabric across the grain? Yes, you can, and in some cases you probably will want to do that, or will have to do that. There'll be some fraying. It's not usually that much. It depends on the fabric you're using. But this is just a way to make sure you have the least amount of fraying. Cutting on a lengthwise grain is particularly important when cutting geometric shapes and block on board. And a reason then again is the stretching, because when you're cutting on the biased, you have more stretch in your fabric. And because the Accuquilt works on a pressure system, it's pushing your fabric into those steel cutting blades. And if it's on the biased, there's more chance of your fabric slightly stretching out. So you want to cut as accurately as you possibly can because that is what the Accuquilt's all about. So that's why you do it, as they say, according to the selvage. So lengthwise on the grain. Then they talk about the pre-cut fabric strips. To use the Accuquilt Gold Cutter, first pre-cut strips of fabric approximately a half an inch wider than the shape you want to cut, and these strips can be layered or fan folded to cut multiple shapes in one pass. So what they're saying there is do a little pre-cutting of your fabric first. Don't try to take a whole big bolt of fabric or stretch it all out and throw it on because it's not going to go through your machine. It's going to be too big. So you do have to cut it down. I'm going to show you that in a moment. And then they talk about saving your fabric. And this is the one thing that Accuquilt is criticized for. People say, well, you waste a lot of fabric. Well, I don't think you waste any more in most cases than you do when you're cutting it yourself anyways. But they say, when laying your fabric on the die, only place it right over the shapes you wish to cut. There's no need to cover the entire board. And you can cut up to 6 layers at a time, and that's a speed thing. But they do have a chart here showing you, okay, if it's cotton, you can cut 6 layers. But if you've got cotton that's got fusible web on it, it's only 4. Batiks, you can cut 6, and then it goes down there. So these are thicker fabrics, so you can't cut 6 layers of all of those. And don't try to do it. If you're having to force your die into your machine, it means it's too thick. You've got too many layers of fabric. Don't do it. You can snap the rollers off. I mean, they're pretty strong, but you don't want to do it. Plus, it won't cut well either. The bottom layers that you've put down there, if you've put more than 6 layers of fabric on it, won't cut all the way through. And then you're sitting there with a pair of scissors or your rotary cutter, and so what's the point? You might as well have done it with a rotary cutter to start with. So this is all very good advice, and then they have little tips and tricks like that. So you can get this on, and I'll have it in the show notes. It's a PDF file right from their site. Okay. This is where I want to go. Yeah. Okay. So that's all very good advice, and it does help with your cutting. But let's, the one other thing I want to talk about is they do have a tool. And I highly recommend that you purchase this tool. It's not very expensive, as you see. It's called the Go Die Pick, $5.99 US. It is necessary because some of your threads from your fabric will get caught on occasion, depending on the die, down in between the foam and the blades themselves. Now, you don't want to get in there with your fingers because you will cut your fingers. They're like razor blades, okay? So this little pick, looks like a dental tool almost, will allow you to get down into that area between the foam and the blades and pull up any threads. And you may have to do this from time to time with certain fabrics. It's not something I have to do often, but it is worth
that time I was cutting those squares that you put me onto, after cutting several of them, I found I needed to use the pick to pick out some threads.
Yeah, because they will.
Because it stopped, it wasn't cutting all the way through.
No. And you might not even be able to see the thread, but as Walter said, you cut it and it looks like there's a couple of strands of thread from the fabric are still attached, like it's not cutting cleanly. You probably need to clean out the blade a little bit. Yeah. It doesn't take much. You just pick it out.
Yeah, it's just you go around the edge of the die and it pulls up some thread.
Yeah, and you can see it's designed for that. It's got 2 different pick ends onto it. But that's a really good tool to have. So I recommend that if you buy an Accuquilt or you own an Accuquilt, get one of these as well. Your dealer may have them in stock. I never ordered one from the website. I got it right from Kawartha Quilting where I bought my Accuquilt. Okay. We're going to go over, I'm going to set up my camera for Walter. He's going to do some filming as we show you actually cutting some fabric. Okay, so I've got my Go Big, it's my electric Accuquilt machine out here, and I just need to turn it on. It's all plugged in. So green light comes on, and just a reminder, if you see a red light come on this, and usually that will only happen if something is jammed in the machine or it thinks there's something stuck in there, then turn it off and turn it back on so you can get the green after you've taken out the jam. That's what the little warning lights are for. All right, so what I've got here is I have one of my Go Cube Mix and Match 8-inch block boxes. Now we are going to talk about the cubes in another session, but this is where I pulled up the one I'm going to use today, and it's just a simple block that does 4 2.5, I think they're 2.5, yeah, 2.5-inch triangles, or squares, not triangles, squares. And you can see on this pad, here's the foam, and in here, you can see the lines are very faint. Those are your blades. There's one that runs all the way around the perimeter, and then there's one down the middle.
So you can cut 4 squares.
So I can cut 4 squares at once, okay? Now, that makes life a lot easier, right? Than if you had to cut each of these individually or fold your fabric, use your ruler, and all that. This will do it in one fell swoop. Remember the tool we were talking about? That's what it looks like again. That's the package tool. And they show on the back someone picking stuff out. So always have that handy. You may not need to use it a lot, but it's good to have. The other thing I need is a cutting mat. Now you can see this one's got marks on it, because they do, because it's cutting into that. But they last a long time, and you can use either side. And in fact, it's a good idea to rotate. If you notice, this one's got a bit of a warp to it. So when I put it down, I'll just put it down on the side a little bit more to warp it back the other way. That is perfectly normal. And how long will one of these last depends on how much cutting you do. To date, I've had my Accuquilt for what, a couple of years? Mm-hmm. And I have not replaced one of these mats yet. Now, I have several of them because, as I said, these mats will sometimes come like with the cube set or with some of the dies. Mm-hmm.
So like this one with the cube set is square. Yeah. And the one, some of your other dies have longer ones, right?
Yeah, it depends on the size of the die. Like you can have one like that. There's a bigger one for like a 10-inch. I have one here that hasn't even been taken out of the package yet. Mm-hmm. And then I have, Oh, I have them all on the floor, and I'm going to say a dirty word. This huge one for the biggest of the blocks. Now, this won't fit in anything less than the Go Big.
Right.
Okay?
It even says Go Big on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It's got that right there. And as I pick up all my little pieces here.
Yeah, but there aren't very many of those dies that you would use the really big one on.
Like, here's one here. That is a big one for the circles. And I've got a couple of other ones here. I think the double wedding ring, which I've never taken out of the package and I've had for a while. That one takes the biggie too. But this will only fit in the Go Big. Or the Studio.
Or the Studio.
The Studio is the industrial strength machine, as we have discussed before. Okay. So essentially, there's 3 components to cutting a piece of fabric. You need your die. You need your fabric. You need your cutting mat. That's all you need. Now, let's talk about setting this up. So here I just grabbed a fat quarter block. And I did iron it. Now, some people say, do you need to starch it? Or use a starch alternative? It's up to you. You can. I have not found that it necessarily makes any better of a cut. But if you have some kind of fabric that is very, very limp, you might want to do that in advance.
But you really shouldn't have any folds in them that they're cutting it over top, right?
No, you shouldn't have any folds in it. Now, I have a couple of folds in this. And just before we started filming this, I realized my iron wasn't quite up to speed. It's still not, because I had to fill it with some more water. You know, you have a tank iron, and the idea is you don't have to fill it up as often, but I still seem to fill it a lot, mainly because it runs all day. But yeah, you don't want any wrinkles in your fabric, because that's going to affect the quality of your cut. All right, so I've got this, but this is pretty big. Now, I could do this. I could put it over there and kind of like the corners go in. And I do that sometimes. But I don't, that's not really the way they recommend it. And they talk about cutting your fabric down into strips. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just moving this out of my way for a second, and show you the way that I will do it. With a little die like this, I'll just take my fabric, fold it over once, put it here off the edge, take my rotary cutter, and I just do a rough cut, just like that. You want to have more fabric so it goes over into the gray areas of your block. Okay.
And you can cut your fabric any way you wish to cut it, to try and save fabric and stuff like that too.
So, ideally, Accuquilt says to cut it with the selvage to the top. Okay, look at my orientation and my machine. Right now, my waist is at this part of the machine. So we're going to call this the back of the machine. We're going to call this the front of the machine. I want to put my fabric on this block with the selvage at the front of the machine, this, away from my body, put it that way, okay? So there it is. So that means that I'll be cutting on the straight of grain. Lengthwise on the straight of grain means less fraying. Do you always have to do that? No. If you're cutting scraps, for example, you may not even know where the selvage is. There is a way to figure it out. If you take your fabric and you pull it this way and it doesn't move, that's straight of grain. If you pull it the other way and you see the stretch, that's against the grain. So that's how you can find if you don't have the selvage. Now, I want 4 of these, but say I wanted more of them. But right now I could just put it down just like that, make sure the selvage isn't on the part that'll cut. So leave a little overhang. A little overhang is okay. And then I put my cutting mat on, and don't turn it. You want this going this way. And put it in. Of course, this piece of fabric is a little long. Now I can cheat. It's only a single layer. I could just put the access here and it'll go through and it'll cut fine. But let's do it the right way, okay? Not the way I, don't do what I do, do as I say. So, say I want 8 of these. I can double up my fabric. Just fold it over. And actually that gives me 2 layers. Now I don't have quite enough fabric to get full, so I'm just going to do the 2 layers. This is going to give me 8 of those. So you just smooth it out on the block. Put your cutting mat on top and let the machine do the work.
So it just automatically sucks it in, right?
The electric. If it's the manual, this machine then you just get it on the roller, and then when you feel it hit the roller, you crank it through. Okay, so I've cut my fabric, but I haven't taken this off yet. Now there's a trick. This will build up static, and you will find that when you lift this off, it'll sometimes, pieces of it will stick to your cutting mat. All you need to do is this. Eleanor Burns does it differently. Eleanor Burns goes twist, and I used to do that until I found this method. All you do is take your hand, just wipe it across it like that. Now you have a problem. And the problem is there must be some fabric stuck down in here, because I've used this block is one of my ones I use a lot. So I'll take my little pick. Just drag it along inside there and see if I pull up anything. Now I'm not really pulling anything up. And somebody already wrote me a note about this exact problem they were having with theirs. Before I address that, let me take a pair of scissors. It's only 1 strand. Maybe 2. Noticed I did manage to cut some salvage in this. I wasn't too careful. And see, there's a problem too you're going to have. If you pull on it when there's 1 strand in cut, it's going to pucker your fabric. You can pull that out. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so I've got 8 of those. Now, why didn't it cut all the way through? Why did it leave those? Well, in some cases, the center point on an Accuquilt die over time might not be getting as much pressure on it as the other parts. How do you solve that problem? Very easy. Let's take this piece of fabric again. I'm going to leave it doubled. So I make the sandwich, but then I take a piece of paper. Let me get a piece of paper. This is something you will not see on the Accuquilt site. I'm showing you real. Doesn't mean that this machine is defective. It's just what happens. I just take a piece of paper, fold it over. This is an old trick from my days of die cutting with paper. Put that on top. And let's see. This hopefully will give enough pressure. Can you run it through twice? Yes, you can run it through twice. But if you're going to run it through twice, be careful you don't shift anything, because then you're going to get uneven cut. Now I'm just showing you running it through twice. I probably didn't have to. Okay, this is static. Oh, had a little problem.
I don't know if you're selling that this was too well.
Well, this is a die I've used quite a bit.
Now, could it also be that your cutting mat's very worn?
Yes, I was just going to say, it could be my cutting mat too. So I did tell you that that cutting mat was warped. So let's get one that's a little newer and give it another shot. And I should cut this fabric, but I'm not going to. I'm going to show you what it's like if I don't cut the fabric all the way. I can still use this. I'm still getting a couple of threads on this die, which would say to me that there is a little bit of a problem with my die. I might have to shim it a little bit more. Doesn't seem to be any thread in it though. But I've had that happen on a couple of my dies in the past. It's not a biggie, but it will happen. And it's just, it could be anything. It could be that this foam isn't quite even across, or the blade, there's a little bit of a dull spot on one of the blades, and that happens in the manufacturing of it. So, I mean, if it happens all the time and on all your dies, there's a problem. And that could be with the machine too. But that's not my problem. Let's do this one more time, shall we? Double the fabric, just cut off some of this. That we don't
Maybe iron your fabric a little better.
Well, okay, that could be because I'm noticing I have folds in it, and because my iron wasn't up to speed. Let's give it a little bit. This is real, people. I'm not editing this out. I'm showing you what can happen.
It wasn't necessarily intentional.
No, but it's real. I mean, does this deter me from using my Accuquilt? No, it does not. But as I said, this is not something you will see on the Accuquilt site. And
use the newer cutting mat.
I thought it was. One spot where it doesn't want to cut through completely. So that could be just the die. But anyways.
It did cut better though this time.
It did cut better. And you know, in this case, if I was having this as a repeated problem, I might give it a little spray with spray starch or with, you know, acorn pressing solution. That kind of thing. I don't usually have that problem, but you see it can happen. So, and I just picked this one at random. But anyways, that shows you, well, look how many I've got. Even with the fact that I stopped to do a little ironing and was doing this, changing it, I still got all these little pieces. So that's what the Accuquilt's good for, is if you've got a whole bunch of little pieces you need to cut out. This is much, much faster than the other. Oh, waist. Okay. This was a fat quarter. And I could have been more economical. I can still take. I don't necessarily have to, well, it's not wide enough on that one. But if I'd been a little bit more careful, I could have had even less waist. Waist doesn't bother me. Okay? I mean, it bothers me if it was a whole yard. Whole meter of fabric, but that's not the case. But that's how it works. So when you can, cut it lengthwise of grain. Press your fabric beforehand, especially if it's really wrinkled. Make sure you use a cutting mat. And if you're finding that there's a little strand or something like that, it may need more pressure, take a folded up piece of paper, or even a piece of cardstock, like the comic book board or something.
But nothing too thick.
Nothing too thick, but you'll know if it's too thick because it won't go in the machine.
Okay.
The machine will reject it. Don't force it in. And this little tool is a good little thing to invest in. Okay, let's go back to the computer. Okay, so we're back at this camera right now. So I hope that gave you some idea of how it works. Now, if you want to be hypercritical about it, you're going to say, well, that's no good. Look, it had those strands and you had all that trouble and you had to do that and everything. Not that big a problem.
And that's not usually the case, right?
No, that's just the luck. That's the way my day's been going today. But it still does not deter me from using my Accuquilt at all. So we had some questions from last week's video that came up, and so we thought we'd go through those. Oh, yes, general maintenance. I didn't speak about general maintenance of your machine and dies. Really, there's nothing you need to do. If you've got that pick, you know, occasionally when you pull out a die, if there looks like there's some threads caught in it, pull them out before you begin. And that's about all there is to maintenance of the machine. Don't abuse it. Don't do more layers of fabric than the machine can handle. And just wipe the outside of your machine if it gets dust on it with a damp cloth. You don't need to do anything else to it. There's no lubricating of any parts or anything like that. So that's all you have to worry about. So it's easy peasy. Okay, comments. Somebody by the name of Marty Brown wrote, I got the Go for my Christmas, but I find I can't afford the dies. I can't afford the dies I want. So what good is the machine? I have a problem with that comment. Okay. I did write back to this person and said, well, first of all, you should have done your research and you should have looked at how much the dies cost. If you spend a lot of money on the machines, no matter which one you buy, are not cheap.
Okay, it sounds to me like somebody bought them, maybe their husband or somebody bought them the machine because they wanted it.
Well, she got it for Christmas, she said. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. They got the machine for Christmas or whatever, and then now all of a sudden they're finding out that the dies are expensive. Right? And that is like with anything. I mean, it's like you buy a car and you got to replace your tires. Your tires are expensive. You still want the car. Like, I mean, the accessories to these machines are not cheap.
Yeah. And it's the second part of this statement. I find I can't afford the dies I want. So what good is the machine? That's not the machine's problem, nor Accuquilt's problem. That's your problem. You should have done your due diligence and found out. What did you think? What really bugs me about this comment is anything you buy in this world costs money. And if you have to buy things to make it work, you know those are going to cost money too. So would it not behoove you to research this? Now, maybe it sounds like maybe this was an unexpected Christmas gift. Wasn't planning to buy an Accuquilt, never looked into it. Somebody thought it would be a great idea to give this person one as a Christmas gift, but now they're complaining about it that they can't afford the dies. So what good is it? Sell it.
Exactly. Sell your machine or something like that. Like, I mean, it's like with anything that you buy, a lot of things have accessories with it that you have to get. Like, I mean, this die cutting machine is what it is. It cuts with dies.
Yeah.
So dies are an accessory that you have to buy.
Yeah.
Right. So, and if you should look into that for pricing and stuff like that. I mean, it's not the machine's fault.
No.
That you have that. If you buy an embroidery machine, it comes with some files and stuff like that. But if you want specialty files, you have to buy them.
Yeah.
To embroider.
You have to buy specially feet for your sewing machine
and
if you want to do
buy
something.
Thread for your sewing machine and everything else. And yeah, thread's cheaper than a die costs, but you still have to buy your fabric and everything else. I mean, it's another accessory.
The whole tone of this comment really says to me, this is someone who's just bitching about, so.
Well, I mean, like then you should have asked at Christmas, I want this die cutting machine and I want these dies.
Yeah. Now there's a way around this. This doesn't necessarily mean that you can never use your machine or whatever. We're going to talk about the cubes, which are a set of dies that you can buy that will do a lot of things. There's probably one of the most economical ways to build up a library of dies. They're still not cheap. However, if you research that and look at what your cutting habits are, what it is, the kind of quilts that you make and that kind of stuff, it might be worth saving up some money to buy one of the cubes. And I think next week we'll probably be talking about the cubes as opposed to the individual dies or the dies that are called bobs, block on board. But yes, they are expensive.
And the Accuquilt system is an expensive die cutting machine set. That's just the way it is.
And really, if you can't afford this, you don't go into debt for it. I mean, you don't have to have the Accuquilt cutting system.
It just makes your life a little easier. That's
yeah. Okay, another comment we got was, I'm making a quilt with the gnome die. My granddaughter loves gnomes. Find the next. My fingers don't work either today. Part of the course. I did throw in a few embroidered ones. Okay, very first die I bought when I got the Accuquilt was the gnome die, because I love gnomes. And it's a great die for that, and I never use it. And in a future session on the Accuquilt die, I'm going to tell you why, because they have embroidery files, which aren't actually meant to be used in the way that I'm going to show you how I use them, but it works very effectively if you have an embroidery machine. But they have a lot of specialty dies, like the gnome, and there's snowflakes and snowmen and boots and mitts and dolls and all kinds of them. In my way of thinking, all those kind of dies are a one-off. And this is where, if we go back to the first discussion, or first comment that was made about the affordability of dies, is, yeah, that gets pricey. Because the gnome die, I think at the time I bought it, was on sale for $45. I think it's more than that on regular price. And if you're only going to use it once, well, that's expensive.
Yeah, so like if you have one of these machines, you may want to investigate not only the cost of the machine and the dies, is buy dies that you're going to use over and over and over again.
Yeah, more than one-offs. I mean, sure, they're cute. And Accuquilt, when they do their YouTube channel, are always pushing all these cute dies they've got. They had one recently that made like a truck, a kid's toy truck. And they were talking about, oh, how cute this was. You could do this into a quilt and all this kind of stuff. If you're going to do multiple ones, it might be worth it. But if you're only doing one or two, you might want to look into using templates or something to cut your applique with it. Or using an electronic die cutting machine if you know how to use one of those to cut your fabric as well. So yeah, you have to do your due diligence in anything you're buying to see if you're going to get your money's worth. Another person said, I have an Accuquilt question. I have a couple of extra dies and also the 4-inch cube. One of the cube dies has 4 squares on the die. My fabric gets caught in the center point. Oh, didn't we just have a live demonstration of that, where the 4 squares come together? If I pull it out, then it distorts and frays the corners of my squares. I do starch my fabrics. I bought the cube at a shop, and the owner suggested that I put a piece of paper under my fabric to help prevent this. She told me that this is a problem with the dies where the squares come together like this. Have you had this issue? Yes, we just did. Thank you for doing the series. I really appreciate your honest reviews of the products and the techniques. Now, when I first read this, I thought, yeah, you need to put the folded piece of paper or a little bit of cardstock on top. And you saw me do that. But you know what this just made me think of? According to the way she's written this, she said the store owner suggested she put a piece of paper under the fabric. Now, what I'm envisioning is the die, the piece of paper, the fabric, the mat. And I'm thinking, because she was talking about it pulling it down into the blades, and that's what was making a clean cut. So guess what we're going to do right now? We're going to do a little experiment.
Okay.
Okay, so the store owner, according to that person that wrote the question, suggested they take a piece of paper and put it on the die first, then lay down their fabric. I am going to use 2 pieces of fabric because that's what I was cutting through before, and this is the same fabric I used a moment ago where I did have a similar problem, and my cutting board. Now, the only reason I hesitate about putting the paper down this way is that, like your good fabric scissors, paper might dull the blades in this block. However, these are not the same as the blades in your scissors, so I don't know. And if you're only doing it occasionally, it's probably not a big deal. But let's see if this makes a difference or not. Yeah? No strings. And bonus, I got a whole bunch of little squares of paper. That worked. Never knew that. Learned that from what that person wrote in. But that did make a difference. So my theory is, what's happening is, the fabric, without using the paper, is being, because, and that person said that the store owner said it's a common problem with dies that are like this, that are, you know, there's a join in them, in the center. So my theory is that without the piece of paper, it's sucking the fabric down in, and it's not getting the full pressure of the blades.
In that corner.
In that corner, yeah. Putting the piece of paper in has, because the paper is more rigid than the fabric, it's not getting pulled down, and so the blades are coming up. That's my theory. God, now I've got all these 2.5-inch squares for all that. But that did work. So thank you for that. Okay, let's go back. So there you go. You learn something new every day. Makes perfect sense to me, though. So great. Thank you for that. Whoever sent that one in. Okay, another one. I have an Accuquilt question. I have a couple of extra dies and also the 4... Oh, wait, that's one I just read. Here. I have an Accuquilt and it's everything. For all those on the fence about buying one, get it. If you ever did a 9.5-inch block completely from AQ, you never go back. Starch AQ, that's Accuquilt, and the perfect 1/4-inch seam will put you as close to perfect as you can get. I have an AQ Go and I have an AQ Me, and I'm always buying dies and mats. So this is someone who loves the Accuquilt system like I do as well. And just reinforcing here that it is worth the investment. I am not a salesperson for Accuquilt. I don't get anything by doing this.
Yeah, you don't get any bonuses or anything.
Nope, nothing. Not a thing. So I'm giving you my honest opinions and reactions to these things. Now, someone asked, have you tried custom dies? Just wondering how much they cost. I imagine mucho dinero. Okay, custom dies is something we haven't talked about. On the Accuquilt site, you can send them in a drawing. There's some specifications, and they can make a die for you out of that drawing. I have no idea how much it costs. I think they send you a quote and everything. Probably depends on how intricate the die is that you want and all of that kind of stuff. And I think they also provide design services. Like you can give them a rough sketch and they can make it into something that'll work. I would imagine it probably costs at least double of what a die of whatever size it is would cost you to buy. So I don't imagine it's cheap. But there's an option for you. If you wanted something really, really special, that might be worth looking into.
Yeah, I don't know how many people, like, I mean, it would maybe be a special type of die that they don't provide yet, or if it was like an applique or something. Or
I would think it would have to be a die, though, that you were going to use a lot of times over. Like maybe you have a business logo.
Yeah.
And you want it somehow to cut out a shape of the business logo. Maybe it was more intricate or something that you can mount whatever on. Or I don't know. I really don't know how many people would want that. But I do know they have that service. available. You have to hunt for it on their site. But I've never done it, and I can't see myself ever wanting to do that either.
I mean, if there was something you had that you were really special that you're going to use over and over and over again, you could probably ask them for a quote.
Oh yeah, they'll give you a quote. I have looked into it just out of curiosity, but I have no idea what the price is because it's not a. I don't think it's a standard price. I think it depends on the complexity of your what it is that you want. Yeah. I purchased the Go. I use it all the time. I love the strip dies. They are more accurate. I also have dies that I use to cut my leftovers from a project, such as 5-inch squares, 1.5-inch squares, 2.5-inch squares, that make scrappy quilts for charity. Yeah. One of the reasons I bought an Accuquilt, besides the fact that I wanted the accuracy, well, I bought it for two reasons that are here. If you're making binding and you're cutting with the fabric 2.5-inch strips, it is very difficult to get your strips, no matter what you're using, a ruler or a stripology ruler or whatever, absolutely straight. You may get a bow in them, a little warp at one end, especially because you're folding the fabric and the whole bit. Whereas with the Accuquilt, you eliminate that problem, and it's faster for that kind of thing. And in fact, that's what I use my Accuquilt probably the most for. Is for cutting binding
so
strips.
The die is actually a really big long die.
It's a big long die with it. And you have to double your fabric over as well. Make sure it's well pressed. And you can cut on the 2.5-inch strip die, which is the one I use to make my binding strips from, because I do 2.5-inch binding strips. I can get 3 strips in a pass with that. And that makes life so much easier and faster. And the other advantage is if you've got, and I have done this, but I haven't done it much, I have all kinds of scraps. And my idea was, okay, I bought the 2.5-inch squares. You just saw them in use. I have 5-inch squares. I have other ones as well. And I thought, one day I'll just sit down, throw fabric onto the Accuquilt and whip these all off, and I can make my own charm packs of things and have all these ready to go. And I have done it, but I don't do it often enough. My scraps they keep multiplying all the time. But yeah, it is a great use. And those of you who are worried about wasting fabric with an Accuquilt, here's how you get around that. You compensate for it. Use this to make your smaller pre-cut pieces with it. So yeah, that is a really good use for the Accuquilt. Okay. The last comment has nothing to do with Accuquilt, but I put it in here because it was one that came from the Sewcial review that we put up, the Fab 5, earlier this week. And it said, great discussion episode. I have a question for the group. Most of you have rulers you've purchased and do not use, so please list your favorite 3 rulers for some guidance. I'm still using my stainless steel straight rulers and need something wider for safety with the rotary cutter. Thank you all. Okay, I have so many problems with this comment. Okay, first of all, 3 rulers that we use. Well, all 3 of us probably have 3 different ones that we use. What do you use? What you were saying the other day when we were talking about this, that you like the 24-inch by 6.5-inch?
Yeah, I like a long ruler like that one. 24 by 6 or 24 by 8 or whatever, a long ruler, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you can get them in 6.5, 8, and even 12.
6.5 or 8, I would like the 24-inch one. And I tend to use smaller rulers because I do more garment stuff, right? I like the 1.5-inch by 12-inch ruler. And I also use another ruler. I'll use like a 6 by 12-inch ruler a lot, or whatever, or a 12 by 12 or something like that.
So a 12 by 12 square?
Yeah.
Yeah. I use pretty much the same ones that Walter is. There's one other one that I use, which is called the Strip Tube Junior. It looks like a triangle, and it's great for squaring up or for trimming down your half square triangles. And because most patterns will have somewhere in them a half square triangle. I really recommend it. It's called the Strip Tube Junior. It comes in several sizes. I have them in several sizes, but that's the size I use the most. It's by Cozy Quilt Designs. I think Jenny Doan for Missouri Star Quilt has her own version that has a little added feature for cutting off the dog ears while you're cutting. I never use that one. I don't like it that much. The cutting off the dog ears seems very awkward to me using the ruler. I just use my snips, and that makes short work of it. But yeah, this is a difficult question to answer because everybody has their preferences. I love my Stripology rulers. They're the big ones for cutting strips and things. I use them all the time. I've got the big one and I have a smaller one. And there's another size you can get to that's kind of in between the two. I don't have that one. But I absolutely love them. They're expensive. The Stripology, the large one ruler, is over $100 Canadian for it. But it's my go-to when I want to cut. If I need to cut borders, and I don't want to get out the Accuquilt for that. Like I may only need 1 or 2 strips or something. Sometimes it's just faster for me to do it with the Stripology rulers than it is with the Accuquilt. So the other part of that question is I'm still using my stainless steel straight rulers. Okay, this is somebody, I don't know how long they've been quilting. I wonder if they have all their fingers still.
Yeah, were they sewing? Were they sewing at one point, or are they using straight rulers from like carpentry or something?
Well, they said a steel one, so I'm picturing those ones. The gray steel flat rulers might have a cork on the back of them, kind of a thing. They don't have a wide enough edge on them to use with a rotary cutter. The whole point of the rulers that are designed for quilting is that they're a 1/4 inch thick acrylic, so that you can rest your rotary cutter blade up against them to make the cut.
I have a couple of steel rulers I use, but I don't use them for cutting.
No.
I use them just for measuring.
So my suggestion to this person is don't walk, run to your quilt store and get the proper quilting rulers.
Yeah, get proper quilting rulers, especially they're nice and see-through.
Yeah.
And you can...
And they have the right markings on them for things and things like that. Yeah. That was just, when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, blood. There's got to be blood with all of that. That's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yeah, and just go to a quilt store and actually go to a quilt store and ask them recommendations for rulers. I mean, most places that are honest won't tell you what not to get. They'll suggest, a couple of different kinds of rulers that you might consider. And then as time goes on, you may find that you'll say, oh geez, I wish I had a 6x12 inch ruler, and you go out and buy a 6x12 inch ruler or something.
I'm a ruler slut. When I started quilting, I bought every bloody ruler there was, and I've got a whole lot of specialty rulers that are a one-off kind of a thing. They seemed like a good idea at the time. However, here's how I buy new rulers. Like Walter said, sometimes you figure out, if I had a ruler that was just more this size, this would be great. But the other way is, I may see a pattern, and the only way you can make that pattern is to use the ruler they have, or it would make my life easier if I had a certain specialty ruler for it. So now I have to balance out the cost of the ruler and how much easier it's going to make making this one project is. And so that's the trade-off. If the ruler costs $20, $25, I won't hesitate. But if the ruler is going to cost $75 to $100 for it, and I know I'm never going to do this pattern again, I will look for alternatives. And sometimes you're sucked into this because some creators of patterns also develop their own rulers to go with their pattern, and they will convince you that you can't make this pattern without the ruler. Well, that's not true. Yeah, but if you've been in quilting for a long time, I'm sure you'll come up with an alternative where you don't have to pay the money for it. So, you've got to weigh, the usefulness of it and the number of times you're going to use it with what it's going to cost you for the rulers. But don't use a steel ruler. No.
Next question is, do you actually use a rotary cutter, or are you using scissors?
Well, he said with a rotary cutter.
Okay.
I said I don't think, I don't know if this person's male or female. It's sort of because it's got a male's name at the beginning of it. But, yeah, it says, I'm still using steel straight rulers, and I need something wider for safety with the rotary cutter.
Oh, okay.
Now, this just made me question. Wider. They mean wider or thicker? Are they talking about, because their fingers would be very close on a steel ruler. A lot of times
steel rulers are not wide.
No, they're not. Right. So is that what they mean? Because if that's what they mean, no. You want thickness too. Mm-hmm. Not just the width for your hand to go on safely, but you want the thickness, the 1/4 inch acrylic, so that your rotary blade won't go scooting across over your fingers. Mm. Because it's all fun and games until you look down and you find that 3 of your fingers are laying on your fabric. You know, not good. You can't put those in your sewing machine and put them back on. No, not going to happen. Okay.
You constantly use red fabric.
Yeah, well, that too. Blood spurt. Whatever. Anyways, that's it for this session of Accuquilt. Next week we'll have another session, and I don't have my notes here to tell you exactly what we're going to talk about. I think we're going to talk about the different kinds of dies and about the cubes and all that kind of stuff as well. So your comments are always welcome in the comment section, or you can send us a direct message to my email as well, and we can answer it, or it brings up something like today. We just learned something right here. You saw it live, sort of live, with that whole business with the piece of paper. So yeah, so please feel free to comment and ask more questions, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.